Mega Drive was released in Japan on October 29, 1988. This was 2 months before Final Fantasy II was released in Japan, and 2 years before most Americans would know the series even existed. 16-bit adventures for Sega's new system, like Phantasy Star 2 and Sword of Vermilion, made NES owners think about the future. The Super Famicom didn't arrive in Japan until November 11, 1990. It handled thousands of colors, dozens of sprites on screen, and 8 channels of sampled sound in full stereo. Backgrounds came to life thanks to Mode 7, which allowed layers to be scaled and rotated. It also supported 4 MB storage units, so anyone inclined to make a role-playing game with this technology could potentially squeeze 40 to 50 hours of gameplay into one plastic cartridge. The Super versions of the NES and Famicom hit the market running thanks to their epic fanbase and solid relationships with third-party developers, including Square. A fourth fantasy was inevitable. Final Fantasy IV was released in Japan on July 19, 1991. For the first time, it also came out in America the same year. It was renamed Final Fantasy II in the States, and with most US gamers absent-mindedly skipping over 2 entries in the franchise, it was considered a phenomenal leap forward. 4 was once again directed by Sakaguchi, designed by Amano, and composed by Uematsu. Final Fantasy IV had a unique protagonist, straying from the series' tendency to place massive burdens on heroes with little to no combat experience. 4's heavily conflicted leading man was Cecil, a Dark Knight of the Kingdom of Baron and commander of the Monarchy's airship fleet called the Red Wings. After questioning the king's request to attack innocent people in the search of 4 crystals, Cecil was stripped of his rank and forced to reevaluate his ambitions. He was aided on his path of redemption by his dragoon companion Kain, his white mage lover Rosa, the lost summoner Rydia, and many others. Final Fantasy IV removed the interchangeable job system from the previous game to focus on the characters, similar to the plot-driven party swapping from 2. Jobs were already assigned and oftentimes related to the plot. Spells and summons were now learned by levels, through specific battle criteria or in accordance with the story. You never knew what crew you were going to end up with, but the arrangements were given a boost by allowing an extra character, making the battle line built for 5, for the first and only time. Telepathic hypnosis played a big factor in characters leaving your group. Once Cecil had left his kingdom behind, the warrior Golbez took control of the Red Wings and the will of Kain. The karate master Yang also briefly fell victim to mind manipulation, and both of your friends had to be smacked around before they eventually snapped out of it. These additional characters didn't just follow, they fought, and sometimes died alongside you. Your ranks gained the abilities of Tella, the vengeful mage, Edward, the pensive bard, Palom and Porum, a precocious pair of young mages, Edge, an impulsive prince, and Fusoya, a resident of the moon with many buried secrets to tell. Even the Tinkerer Cid grabbed a club and finally took matters into his own hands. It's also worth noting that Rydia is one of the only characters in the entire franchise that goes through a permanent physical transformation. She left your party unexpectedly and resurfaced in the Land of Summons, where time moved faster. She dropped her ability to perform white magic, but gained several new spells, her full summoning potential, and a matured character sprite. 4's biggest technical influence on the rest of the series was the introduction of the active time battle system created by Hiroyuki Ito. With it, adversaries don't wait patiently for players to input actions. Instead, each enemy and character gets a turn every few seconds, with players forced to act quickly if they want to finish the battle with minimal damage. The system made combat a bit livelier, allowing for more engrossing gameplay. The battle screens added unique terrain layouts underneath their heroes and enemies. The environments, characters, monsters, and bosses all received a significant improvement in detail. Group spells all animated at the same time. Smoke and fog was now transparent. Square clearly proved that Final Fantasy IV could not have been done on the 8-bit Nintendo. You could even adjust the color of the menus. While previous fantasies typically had just the planet's surface to explore, 4 added 2 free-roaming maps, the Underworld and the surface of the Moon. Your flying machines were fashioned with accessories to help you get to these new places. The Lunar Whale was resurrected to help you reach the stars, and black chocobos were introduced that could fly but only land in forests. All of Nobuo Uematsu's scores have been exceptional for their era, but Final Fantasy IV was the first noticeable example of the melodic subtleties and enduring themes that his work has gradually become famous for. Theme of Love has been taught to Japanese school children as part of their curriculum. The tracks from 4 have appeared on several compilation albums and have been performed live by numerous orchestras and metal bands. The story in 4 rekindled the 4-tier elemental structure and even referred to the monsters as fiends. Mylon, Kainazo, Valvalis, and Rubicant weren't the original names, but their inclusion was a nod to the first game. Summons were also given peculiar names, as 4 first introduced Americans to the advanced magic. Shiva, Odin, and Bahamut kept their names throughout the series, but Americans first knew Ifrit and Ramu as Jinn and Indra. One of the towns in 4 began a Final Fantasy tradition of names reappearing in later games, as Mysidia, originally from Final Fantasy II, returns as a homey mage village. 4 made several direct references to our universe as well. It was the first fantasy to name its world, as Fusoya refers to it as the Blue Planet. He explains that he and the rest of his race, called the Lunarians, originally came from a planet in between Mars and Jupiter. Fusoya also revealed that Golbez was not their ultimate enemy, as he was also being brainwashed by another Lunarian named Zemus. Eventually Zemus revealed his true form, but with the help of some well wishes from home, Cecil and company found the strength to overcome the overgrown evil. 4 was the first Final Fantasy and one of the first RPGs to have multiple characters with their own deep, intertwining stories and affecting relationships. It was the first to link two heroes together romantically, a device the later Final Fantasies would hinge entire plotlines on. Some criticisms were raised regarding the spotty English translation, but even those little quirks are recalled with fond memories by longtime fans. The script and the graphics would be continually revised as 4 was ported to the PlayStation, WonderSwan Color, and Game Boy Advance, and it's scheduled to be released in 3D on the Nintendo DS sometime before the end of 2007. 4 has sold close to 3 million copies across all its systems, but it was not an immediate hit. Whether it was because of 4's international sales numbers, Nintendo's tentative relationship with Square, or the time and resource-consuming task of translating one massive game after another, the next title was for the third time in the franchise, only released in Japan. Despite thousands of American gamers suddenly discovering the role-playing series, the fifth installment wouldn't make it to US shores until the end of the decade.